Hi there everybody! Welcome back to my channel. I'm Alice Takeover. Yeah, Takeover isn't actually my last name, but it's just for fun. Today we're going to be talking about how to get paid as a model and what that entails exactly. I'm going to be talking more from the point of being a freelance model because I don't really like the way that agencies do their payouts. I'm sure that there's some agencies out there that do their business professionally, but as far as I've seen, I haven't really seen any of them pay the way that I would want to be paid. So instead of joining an agency, I decided personally to become a freelance model, and I advocate more for that because I think agencies need to step it up a notch. In terms of having exclusive contracts with agencies, meaning that you can't get work outside of the agencies are going to control who you work with and when, and for how much money. And unfortunately, a lot of agencies pay only quarterly, meaning 4 times every year. So I personally just don't feel comfortable being paid every 3 months out of the year. I rather get paid when I do my work right there and then, and as a freelance model, I'm able to do that. Being a freelance model means that you get to set your own pricing and you also get to determine who you work with and when. So as a freelance model, how do you determine your pricing? This is a question that many models and photographers juggle around a lot. They really don't know how to articulate how pricing works, so I went ahead and made this video to talk about what pricing entails. When models are determining their pricing, it's based on a number of things. So first and foremost, it takes time out of the model's day to go online and check messages and to be able to filter out inquiries from photographers who are looking to book photo shoots. The ones that are serious versus the ones who are not so serious and they're just fangirling over the model and want to hire them, but that's the behind the scenes work that we don't get paid to do right away until we go to the photo shoots that we end up confirming bookings with. And as freelance models, we have to plan the structure of how our tours are going to go. And we have to figure what expenses we're going to have as we move along through our tours, including things like travel time, so either airfare or car gas, gasoline for our cars, and or also car rentals if we say we fly in and we get a rental car and then we need to put gas in that, or we need to actually pay for the rental car. Traveling models also have to determine a place to stay, so we either need to find host photographers, we need to find Airbnb, Vrbo, or some other sort of rental, a hotel, an inn, or a hostel. And we have to factor in food as well. We have to eat while we're on tour, and we have to account for any miscellaneous expenses. So all of the work that freelance traveling models put into the back end of planning for photo shoots is really what makes the meat of our pricing. Filtering requests from photographers who are actually willing to hire us and ones that are just fangirling and wanting to hire us and don't actually have the means to do so. And also how we're going to get to the photo shoots and where we're going to stay when we're doing the photo shoots and what we're going to eat during the photo shoots. So there's a lot of back-end work that goes into pricing and detailing in that regard. And so we also have to keep in mind what each model should be charging as individuals. Now there's a lot of debate on what newer models should be charging versus what experienced models should be charging. I have mentioned before, and I mention it in my courses as well, where I don't feel like that there is a ladder per se, like you would find in a 9-to-5 job, of climbing that experience ladder in order to get to the next tier where you end up charging more. That I don't really believe that exists here to a degree. So when I first started modeling, I started modeling because it paid way, way above minimum wage. So there's some models who get involved for the creative aspect, sure, and I have creative aspects that I enjoy with my career, of course, but at the end of the day, it was the money that ended up getting my little, young brain to get involved into this career in the first place. And I think that's pretty respectable. I was a veterinary technician for animals, so nursing for animals, and I loved my career, but it just didn't pay what I thought I was worth. So when I saw this career and that it paid a lot more than my college degree career did, I decided to make the switch. So in order to get models of high quality, there has to be a high rate there for them to price themselves at in order for them to feel like their value is being respected and that they're charging appropriately for their services. And it's because I get paid so much as a traveling freelance model that I don't go back to my 9-to-5 job. With that said, over time, my pricing has changed a little bit and it has increased a little bit just because there are a couple of factors that go into what a newer model should be charging and what an experienced model should be charging. I don't think that the newer models should be charging too low, but I also don't think that it's got to be too far off from the ones who are more experienced. So the one determining factor above all other factors in price setting for every individual model is their ability to pose in general. Do the models know the basics in posing? Do they understand their basic shape making? Do they understand their facial positioning, whether or not they know how to emote with their face? And can the model be able to emote, make shapes, move around effortlessly in almost a dance-like fashion where they have their whole model-esque selves put together versus models that have to move and then go, oh, I have to think about the next move before where do I put my arm. A model who can pose effortlessly can charge a lot more than a model who doesn't pose as fluid. So if a model has her basic poses down and she's pretty fluent in the way that she poses, the next determining factor in deciding how much a model should be charging as an individual is if she's a highly sought after model, she should be charging more. If she's more on maybe the local scale, or she's just a regionally based model and she's not out on call everywhere around the country or around the globe, then her rate might be a little bit lower than say the ones who travel on the national scale. As a model, if you find that you're more in demand by photographers to hire, then charge more than your peers do. If you're a highly sought after model and you're charging more than your peers who are not as highly sought after, it levels out the industry where those not so highly sought after models can still charge their rates at a high rate, but you can charge even higher and so work for the same amount or even more and still get paid a lot. And so if you were to set your rate at, say, and this is just an example, I'll give rates here in just a second of a ballpark for our current economy. So say you were charging like $150 an hour, and your counterpart models who are not doing as well in booking photographers, they're also trying to charge $150. They may end up having to charge $125 or even $100 an hour to be able to make up because you're able to book all this work and photographers only have so much budget. And not for one second do I think that there's any competition in this industry. I think every individual brings something unique to the table, but some looks are more highly sought after by photographers than others, so keep this in mind when you're setting your pricing. Biggest determining factor in setting your rates is the current economy and what other people are charging in comparison. So in our current economy in 2023, in October, we are now at a point where $150 per hour is the set standard, and it used to be $100 an hour. Then like around 2019, it got to $125 an hour. And then the pandemic hit, and then everybody's tours kind of fell apart and everybody's lives in general just ended up not working out with their employment. So a lot of models were out of the job for about 6 months, and a lot of them went to online fan site work, or a lot of models ended up doing virtual photo shoots where they did like these photo shoots over over their laptops and stuff to make ends meet through the pandemic. But after that was all said and done, we ended up all rejoining the industry at about early point this year. I think everybody was back to it. So about January 2023, we all started joining the industry back again, and everybody started actively shooting and hiring models. But our economy has been a little shaky. A lot of prices have risen for just about everything. So in order to make up costs and things, the industry had originally went from like 100 per hour to 125, and now we're at 150 solid as a baseline. That is not what I charge. That is what most industry leading models charge as a baseline. I don't think any model should be charging under $150 an hour at this point. So because of all of the pre-planning and all of the execution that models have to go through, from the starting point of answering messages and booking people in to flying out or driving out all the way to the location, and then also doing the photo shoot itself, that is where our pricing comes from. It's a combination of all of the planning, the execution, their abilities as a model, and their general look and popularity amongst the photographers in the industry who want to hire them, and just the economy in general and what it takes as far as expenses versus profits in order to make a substantial living. So an extremely important note this somewhere. This is a really important note to make. Newer models, please do not undersell yourselves. Do not charge too low for your services, because a lot of creepy photographers, a lot of dangerous people end up hiding in the shadows, and they don't want to hire models for a lot of money. In general, the higher you charge, the higher respect you're going to get, and the lower you charge, the lower amount of respect you're going to get. This has happened on many occasions, especially with the lower end workshops where they're only charging people like $100 an hour to you, and the photographers that are attending may only pay like $20 to $30 to just show up. It's amazing how much a little bit of a difference makes in, like, you wouldn't think that's a big deal, like $100 an hour versus $150 versus $200, like $50 difference per hour, right? Like an extra $100 if say you wanted to attend a 2-hour workshop. But it does matter at the end of the day. I've seen it with my own eyes where if you are going to something like, say you're underselling yourself for a tour and you book people at $100 an hour, or you go to a workshop and you're only making $100 an hour generally, you get a crowd of people who are hiring you who don't respect your value at the same level as the other model counterparts that you have, and you'll be treated with a lot less respect and a lot less dignity. You're gonna get a lot of people who make sexual remarks towards you, you'll get a lot of people who put you down, a lot of people who have issues and they just project that out onto you, and at the end of the day, you're just there to get your picture taken. You know, you don't want to go through all of this like being put down and just being dragged down by these people who are not in a healthy space of mind, and they don't value you at the rate that you should be valued at because you set your rate low. If you set your rate high, the opposite happens. They treat you with respect. A lot of the time they buy food for you. Like, it's a whole different ball game with people who respect you and they respect your worth versus people who are only paying a cheap rate for a cheaper model. So if you're a model who's nervous to start charging high rates, I have advice for that. Because I was there at one point where I was new and I was like, well, I know I need to climb my way up the ladder, which isn't really true. I started charging something like $75 an hour when I started because I heard you could charge like up to $75 to $100, and every photographer was like, honey, no, please stop doing that. And they would end up, they were really nice. They ended up tipping me and they told me about this going down like this devalued way. If I ended up only making $75 an hour, I had to charge at least $25 an hour more at that time. And I was like, oh wow, okay. And so from that point, I ended up doing this sort of marketing system where I would charge extremely high, like something like at that time, you know, 100 an hour was like baseline, but if I charged 200 an hour, people were like, wow, she must be amazing if she's at 200 an hour, but I just can't afford it. So in order to have them be able to afford it, I would discount for any sort of reason, whether it be a holiday. So like say I went out like around Easter or something, like even if it wasn't on Easter Day weekend, even if it was just during that month, I would say like, oh, Easter discount, like I'm taking a tour to Chicago, and for everybody who's going to hire me in that month while I'm touring in Chicago, my rate is originally 200 an hour, but I'm discounting to 175 or 150 for people I enjoyed working with or something. And so I would say like, I'm discounting for the holiday, and that's where people would go, oh wow, I'm getting a deal. And that's where I would then in my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm making the amount that I know I'm valued at, and I know that I'm making the amount of money that I need in order to fulfill my life, in order to be able to pay my bills and my expenses and still save for retirement. So, and it's not discounting too far where I'm devaluing myself way too far. It's like I would just overestimate for people how much my rate would normally be. So it was like something astronomical that people would be like almost confused about. They'd be like, oh, well, some people would go, oh wow, she must be so awesome and stuff to be able to charge that high. But a lot more people would be skeptical and they'd be like, oh, she's probably full of herself and she's way overcharging or whatever. And so from there, then I would discount just a little bit to bring it back to industry standard, and people would go, okay, well, I'm hiring a high quality model for an industry acceptable rate. So that's how I was able to book a lot of work back in the day when I toured nonstop. Like I used to tour so much. Nowadays, I don't know if anybody else goes through this. Maybe there are some freelance traveling models. I'm really blessed. I'm able to now take the time for YouTube because I have just a handful of people that I really like to revisit and travel back to. And instead of charging per hour, which is an industry standard, most models charge per hour and they have 2-hour minimums. But in my circumstance recently, in the last year or so, I have returning clients who keep coming back to me and they just want to charge like one flat rate for like 2 days of shooting. And so I'll just go and I'll work with one person who flies me out and gets my food and room and just pays my one flat rate. And I mean, you know, to their privacy, I won't disclose how much it is, but it's, you know, it's a considerable number for 2 days straight. You know, if you think at least 150, you know, in my case, I charge like 200 an hour times at least 8 hours times 2 days, you know, then it adds up. So I have just a couple of people I rotate through to do that way. And it works out quite nice. So thank you to those photographers who allow me to be able to have more time on my hands, being able to film informational videos for YouTube and to be able to take the time needed to educate more in the industry. And that's what's important for you as well. You shouldn't undercharge because at the end of the day, I'm sure you need to make a certain quota for your bills and you would like to retire someday. So, you know, being able to make as much money as possible with the least amount of effort is always desirable and always should be should always be striven, you should always strive for. You should always strive to make the most amount of money you can with the least amount of stress. So I hope you enjoyed those tips. I think in this industry we needed a video to kind of outline what it is that the photographers are expecting, because at the end of the day, they're not going to tell you that your rate is wrong, because if you hold yourself at a certain value, then they're not going to refute that. But I think everybody needs to be set at a baseline of understanding, just so everybody knows where we're all coming from as far as what the models are charging and why. So this video is a little bit for both, a little bit for models to study and a little bit for the photographers to study so they have an understanding. And I don't want models to think that they're unworthy or that they're failing just because they're not getting bookings. It's just a matter of if you know that what you're charging is equal to what the industry expectations are and to what your experience level is within reason, as far as if you know your basic posing and if you know how to schedule these tours effectively. And you don't necessarily need to have a ton of experience to be able to say, I can charge really high. You just need to know your basic posing and you need to know what the industry expectations are. So as a traveling freelance model, keep these tips in mind when you're scheduling your tours and you're setting your rates for photographers, so that way you're not price gouging them. And more importantly, to uphold your value to the highest extent possible, not devaluing your worth, and all while upholding the industry's exclusive and prestigious status. It's a huge deal to become a model. It's a very exclusive industry, and I want everybody that joins to be able to have fun, create art, and enjoy the process. If you like this video, feel free to give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more. And leave me a comment down below if you have something to say on this topic. I had a model one time where I posted this really vague short, which was an excerpt from my courses, but even with the vague shorts, I post them more for a topic of conversation, but she ended up saying something ridiculous on there, like newer models should be charging $25 an hour and work their way up from there. And I was like, oh my gosh, like if they're charging $25 an hour, they might as well work as like a fast food worker. They don't need to be going out there and exerting themselves to the degree that we do as traveling freelance models and not get paid appropriately for that. By the way, I've never actually heard of anybody charging like $25 an hour. I think that's absurd. Please don't do that. You'll end up around the total wrong crowd, people who are going to abuse their power over you and so forth. So hold your value high, charge appropriately, and above all, have fun. This industry is wonderful. It's better than any 9-to-5 job, and I love being in this career. I couldn't imagine it any other way, and I always hope the best for you as well. Thanks again for tuning into this video, and I'll see you on the next one.